Hi, everyone. It's about 12:01, so we'll get started. Thanks for joining our webinar today, and good afternoon. My name is Carmen Bray. I'm the Director of Communications for the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. So we want to thank everyone for joining us today, all of our members and supporters who are on this webinar, the benefits of water-thirsty trees. I know it's a cute name, right, for a not so cute problem, which is stormwater runoff. But we know this, we know trees are one of our best allies for capturing and slowing and storming and filtering stormwater before it enters our waterways. And those trees are helping to improve water quality, and those are good buffers as well. So today we'll have some more discussion related to those, but if you're not familiar with the Conservancy, this is just one of many types of programs and projects that we do and undertake across the region. The Conservancy, we are a local nonprofit conservation organization established in 1932. We've been around for 90 years. This is our 90th year that we're celebrating. And our mission is to work locally on planting trees and gardens and green spaces in our region and protecting land for wildlife and for us to hike and enjoy nature and explore. We restore waterways, we study wildlife, and we protect Frank Lloyd Wright's falling water. So if you want more information about all the things that we do and want to get involved, go to our website, waterlandlife.org. But I think you're really going to enjoy our talk today. And we have two of our experts here on staff. He'll talk a little bit more about the work of our tree work and buffers related to protecting our rivers and streams. So Alicia Trexler, she is a watershed project manager. She's in our watershed conservation office in Indiana, PA. She has a wealth of experience, 19 years of it, with water quality monitoring and watershed management. So she's going to talk a little bit about some of our more rural work that we do with riparian buffers. And Brian Crooks, he's our community forester and works in our TreeVitalize Pittsburgh work, doing some GIS and caring for the trees that we plant. He's also a professional certified arborist, and we'll be able to share some of our urban work that we do in this area. But before I turn it over to Alicia, just a few kind of housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded. We will have this webinar on our website later today or first thing in the morning. And all of you here on the call will be getting an email with that link, so you can be able to watch it later and share it with your friends and family related to our tree work and all about the benefits of trees. Also too, once you're listening and hearing from Alicia and Brian, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A section of the platform, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So we look forward to those questions, and without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Alicia.
Thanks, Carmen. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Brian and I are so excited to speak with you today about trees and why they are so important for water quality and what makes them so special because they are so thirsty for water. This is today's topics. Like you see, we'll do trees, but I'm also going to do a little intro into watersheds. As Carmen said, I do work for our watershed conservation program. I'm in Indiana County, and I want to just make sure everybody's on the same page with what a watershed is before we go into things that help protect and promote healthy watersheds. So if you think about an area of land where all of the water that rains or snows on it drains to the same place and everything that runs underneath it all goes to the same point. That's what a watershed is, the edge boundary and all that water going down to the same spot. And it's so important to know what watershed you live in. Even if you don't live near a stream, you're still in a watershed. So here I am, you can see Homer City here. That's where I live, and I live on my farm in a small little watershed called the Cherry Run watershed, but I'm also a a part of a bigger watershed, the Ohio River watershed. All of my water is heading over there to Pittsburgh. And it's really important to think about that. And if you're curious about what watershed you live in, you could Google flat out, what watershed do I live in? Or there's a source, or I'd love to help you later to think about what watershed you live in. But why do we need to know about what water we live in? When we need to think about where our water goes. All our water is going downstream. And in the end, all our water from my house to your house around Pittsburgh, it's all heading down to the Gulf of Mexico. And not everybody thinks about that all the time. And it's important. We need to know what our neighbors upstream are doing, but we also want to be good neighbors for the people using the water downstream of us. And I'm moving my slide. There we go. And one of the ways we can help our watershed stay healthy is to take care of the trees that live in it. And trees are so important on so many levels. They can add property value. They are aesthetically pleasing. They could be memories for everyone. But today I want to focus on why trees are important for water quality. And you can see this list of trees. And when I say trees for today, I'm also going to include the woody shrub species. That's also what we deal with when we're helping protect watersheds. And one of my favorite workhorse trees is the swamp white oak. And that's what we can see in this picture right here. This is a swamp white oak that's actually planted on my own farm. And let's talk about this tree from top to bottom. And when we talk about trees and their most important time of year, it's in full summer. When they're totally leaved out, they provide the most benefits. At the top, these leaves are intercepting rainfall, they're absorbing rainfall, and they're also providing shade. If we think about the middle of the tree, our trunks help slow flood water. They recharge groundwater by pulling it up and holding it and letting it out. And they also store some carbon. And at the bottom, the tree, the roots help absorb the nutrients. They just hold things in place, and they also promote infiltration. So all parts of the tree are important from top to bottom. And they're really, truly important in riparian areas. And that's a word I would really like to bring attention today. This is the focus of our topic. Riparian area is a place. It always exists. We often hear riparian buffer, and that's because that's a job that the riparian area is doing. It's buffering pollutants, it's holding soil. But I want everyone to realize that a riparian area always exists, whether it has trees or not, whether it's in the best condition or the worst condition. That riparian area is always going from the stream edge up out to maybe 70, 100 feet along a stream, from the smallest to the biggest. So why do we need to plant trees in riparian areas? Well, we may not realize that we're enjoying things around water because a riparian area is in great shape. We could be kayaking on the water, we could be going for a walk, we could be enjoying some butterflies, wildlife, even our livestock benefit from healthy riparian areas. So we may not be looking at a stream, but if we're in an area where there's clean water, it's because our buffers are doing a great job. So we need to promote great stewardship. And I'd love you all to think about why you might want a healthy riparian area. One of my biggest jobs, as I'm doing today, and I like to do almost every day, is I talk to people about riparian areas. I'm trying to raise riparian awareness, to make people think about a stream that they may not even see, because if a riparian area is in great shape and doing a good job, someone doesn't see the stream, they don't know it's being protected. So it's a catch-22. You like to protect things you can see, but you can't see it if you've protected it. So I want to talk to you all about trees, but I also want to give you some words to be able to go talk to some others about trees. I want to challenge you to think about, when you leave today, to talk to 3 people. Pick 2 people that you know, maybe your parents, maybe your partner, maybe your kids, and practice talking about riparian areas and say, have you ever thought about a stream? Have you thought about what keeps them healthy? And then maybe talk to somebody that you don't usually talk about buffers. If you're out walking around, you're looking at some ponds somewhere, see if you can have a conversation about that. I think it's a lot of fun. I've been talking about buffers for a long time here at the Conservancy. You can see on the map here that we've planted a lot of riparian buffers at a lot of different sites. We also collaborate with landowners, local officials, state and federal partners to help put buffers on public and private land. And we also love to go talk to other people about buffers. So I get to do all of these fun things. And one of the things when I try to encourage people to think about buffers is I need to promote riparian awareness. I need you to think about streams and what's going into them. Not only is it water, but there's leaves there, and there could also be pollution along this habitat location, and we need to keep this in great shape. The other thing we need to think about is the width of a buffer. How wide does a buffer need to be to do its job? A natural riparian area would be fully intact and not have any disruptions, but we know that's not always the case. People like to live near water, people work near water, and so there will be some disruptions, but we can mitigate some of these open places by having smaller buffers. We can have a narrow buffer less than 35 feet along the edge of a stream, and we're still having stabilization protection. If we have a super wide buffer, we get all of these benefits that you can see along the green arrows. And what are we protecting from? Pollution can be this in the form of soil, it can be in the form of debris, it can be in the form of even just temperature. All of these things can impact water quality, and we have the tool to help protect the streams and the stream banks, and those are trees. And what do we do when we're planting riparian areas? We find an area that's open without trees, and we work with the landowner to plant the trees along the streams. We're planting by hand typically, opposed to having someone come in and dig a hole. The trees are smaller when we're doing these big buffers because we're planting about 200 trees per acre at about 10 to 15 foot density. There could be anywhere from 14 to 18 different species that I would pick off of that list I presented earlier. And all of these trees are going to grow into super tools to protect riparian areas. But let's think about riparian areas a little bit more. Where should we plant them? So you're understanding I'm saying we want to plant trees along streams, but what else should we plant trees along? Do we call it a stream? Do we call it a river? Do we call it a spring, a seep, a creek, a creek? If we're in Western Pennsylvania, is it an intermittent wet channel? Sometimes it's only there part of the year, and that's okay too, because those little intermittent channels are very important. They still transfer water and pollution, and we can also plant them near ponds and lakes. So the next few slides that are going to come up is a little bit of interaction that we're going to have. I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to name what you think the water is in that picture, and the poll will come up, and then we'll talk a little bit about why these pictures are having some trouble. And Carmen's going to help me out with this. So here's our photo. We're looking at the water in the middle of the stream. We're thinking about what's going on. What do you think this is? The poll can come up and you can click the box. And as this box comes up, you can move it out of the way to see the picture better. Do we think it's a run, a brook, a stream? And I know you guys can select your poll. But this picture, and the results will probably be up in maybe 20 seconds or so. The answer is going to be it's a stream. It could be a run. It could be a stream. It's a little tributary, but it's there all the time. But what people might see it as is an ugly ditch that doesn't need protecting. And that's not true. We can look, we called it a run. That's more than fair because it's smaller and that's what people like to call it. But in the end, it's a stream going somewhere and it can transfer pollution. This gravel and everything here could be made to have some room so it's not running into the stream. I understand we can't move the road, but we can still plant some trees on the other side of it to help shade it. So there's a lot we could do to help improve the riparian area in this picture. All right, I'm going to go to the next picture, I hope. There we go. So here's another picture. Take a look, take it in. Think about the water is coming out the pipe and running away from us. If you want to think about this, I have found wild trout up from this area breeding. And this happened in an area where a township actually thought that this needed cleaned out. So I'm going to say this isn't the best practice. I understand that we do have some water drainage issues near roads, but we can do other things to protect water quality. The pole box should be up shortly, and you can pick what you want it to be. But what do we do about this? How do we talk to municipalities and help them understand that this is in fact a stream? It is a tributary to a larger area. Poll results should be coming. Yes, we got it. This is a stream. If we know it's having wild trout reproduce in it, it's definitely a stream. And it's kind of sad to think that this got dug out and all of this sediment is going to end up downstream because people just saw it as a road ditch. We're going to go to one more picture here. Yep. All right, here we are in town with water running along the road again. I think we're seeing a theme here. What is this? Yeah, we can see we have some choices to pick from here. Think about what's going on in this picture, and does it need to be this way? And no, what's happening is this got herbicide. We're trying to control the vegetation, maybe because the vegetation catches the trash. Could be other reasons why somebody doesn't think the vegetation needs to be here. And is this pretty? I don't think. I think this is pretty ugly. We could let small flowers grow in here. Go ahead, we can show the results of this poll. Yay, we got it. We know it's a stream. We can call it a creek too, and it is a trench, but we can make these trenches beautiful. This is still transferring water and pollution. And so this is the work that both Brian and I do, whether we're in town, this could be in a rural community, this could be on the way to somebody's house, or this can be in the middle of the city. This is happening, and we need to make people aware that it doesn't have to look like this. We're just so used to seeing this image and not thinking that there is a better way. So let's talk about the better way. We need to raise the riparian awareness and make this not so perfect reach. Even right here, there's grass up against it, but they've been herbiciding the side of the stream. We could plant it and bring it closer to this picture with the autumn leaves. We can make it look more like a natural buffer. How do we do this? We work on practices. We talk to people. We ask them to change some of their habits. We just need to make the less than perfect reach, which is the focus of a stream. If you're looking at a certain area of stream, that is called the reach. We need to make that less than perfect reach better. So how are we going to reach that perfect reach? We may never. We work with landowners, and some landowners don't want trees all over the place. This is a picture. You can see a cornfield over here on the right. The landowner was willing to have this buffer here, which could be 100 feet wide, but he wanted it about 50 feet, and that's perfect. He can still grow his crops, and we can have some more trees along a stream. So it's working on a balance. We need to work with the landowners. This is an example that I helped with about 10 years ago. This is in Indiana County. This happens to be on an Amish farm, and there's several of us that stopped and visited with the landowner and talked to him about potentially putting a buffer on his stream. He has livestock in here, both horses and cows, and he agreed to allow some fence to be put up, and we planted trees on here. So this picture here in the background shows the trees 10 years later, and to give you some reference on angle, you can see the star here where the gentlemen are walking and the star here next to the tree. They're just looking opposite ways at the same spot. So that buffer went from that open overgrazed field to a well on its way to becoming a closed canopy forest. And this will help water quality. We've already seen new macroinvertebrates and fish move into the area. It's promoting and protecting wildlife as well as a whole bunch of other things. It's also got the attention of neighbors. They want us to come out and help buffers and improve water quality. This is my own home. This is my farm. This is a riparian area. I inherited a farm from my great grandparents, and this used to be overgrazed pasture area. And changes in family, changes in thoughts, I chose to put a buffer in. And we can see a buffer doing its job. And you might say it looks a little messy. It looks a little, looks a little flooded right now. And that's what a buffer is doing. A buffer is giving stream its space. You can see the stream at the far point in the picture. It has come out of its banks, which streams do, and it's flooding over into the riparian area, and it will go across my driveway. But because the trees are here dissipating the energy, the native vegetation, it isn't causing as much damage. That if it ripped out of the stream and totally tore, it could tear my culvert out that I have. And so I've just changed maintenance ideas. I'm not mowing an area anymore, but I still have to keep an eye on these trees and help the buffer do its job. And that's what I'd like you all to think about. Again, remember your challenge. Let's look at our own streams in our backyard. Maybe it's a relative's place. We go over there and say, hey, can we stop mowing a little bit near the stream, back things up? These are all ideas that I want you to think of and take away. And hopefully we've learned that we can protect riparian areas by planting riparian buffers. And we can do this in any landscape. We can do it, as I said, a rural, at a farm. We can do it at a park. We can do it in the city. And I challenge you to help us find some places to plant buffers. If we can't do it at your place or your friend's place, maybe ask someone else to contact us. But if we want to talk about city plantings, Brian's the guy that can do it for us. And he's going to talk about how trees can work in urban areas as well as they can work in riparian. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for you, Brian.
Thanks, Alicia. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right. Can you see that, Carmen and Alicia? Are you able to see that on there? Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Alicia. That's all great work that you're doing all across Western Pennsylvania. I actually grew up just a few miles from where Alicia's at and her farm. So I guess much like the waters worked its way downstream, I guess I've worked my way downstream with it. So here I am in Pittsburgh, and yeah, doing a lot of work here with trees and buffers and plantings in urban areas. On the screen here, you see a picture. Oh, actually, let me put it in presentation mode. Actually, that would look better. There we go. We see here just a photo of a part of Pittsburgh. This is on the Ohio River looking upstream towards the point and downtown. It's just a photo like perhaps what many cities might look like, very urban, very developed. And we think about where could a buffer even go here? We often think of rivers and throughout the entire landscape, but especially in urban areas. This is where we have built our railroads, built our highways, built our homes, where we have infrastructure. It's where mills were built and large industry centers. So oftentimes there really isn't as easy as a space to put a buffer next to a stream or a river in an urban area. This photo here, this is kind of what we see sometimes, just the natural strip that's really just the riverbank. It's where the steepness of the riverbank starts. It's where it just didn't make sense maybe to develop things, where we couldn't develop things. Maybe trees have regrown over time. They're often growing out of old concrete or slabs or river barriers, things like that, covered in vines oftentimes growing along there. And this is just this natural strip. And sometimes even we don't have that at all. We developed all the way up to the river itself. This is the downtown side of the Allegheny River looking across the North Shore where the stadiums are at. And we can see here, we just have basically old concrete all the way up to where it drops straight to the river. This 10th Street bypass area floods very routinely, especially in the spring when we have snow melt and then heavy rainfall. But we can still find places to plant trees. We can plant individual trees right along the river itself, or we can find maybe more unique ways in other areas that are perhaps surrounded by hardscape. This strip here used to just be basically all grass with a couple mature trees, and why not turn this into more of a dynamic situation with different types of levels of cover, different types of shrubbery and pollinator species. This is just a zoomed in area of that same spot, and you know, this really is a small microclimate. You know, even though we have that busy highway right next door, in previous field seasons, we've seen monarch butterflies, their chrysalises on some of the milkweed here. We know that they're being used by wildlife, and regardless of the wildlife benefit or the stormwater benefit, they just also make a nicer place to recreate, and they're more fun to walk on or ride our bikes on. I love to ride my bikes around the trails, and just having cooler temperatures to bike in, having comfortable places to recreate in just lends itself to just a better dynamic in the downtown area. Perhaps some of you watching have been seated in a view of about this space here at PNC Park. I'm a pretty big Pittsburgh Pirates fan, and this stadium is often regarded as one of, if not the most scenic stadiums in the entire Major League Baseball network here in North America. We have a wonderful view of the river, wonderful view of the city. But one thing that's missing perhaps from this specific photo, I don't know if it was done on purpose or not to do this, but you really can't see any trees in the photo. There are trees there. I'll show you some photos later, but we think about view sheds, whether it's PNC Park, whether it's Mount Washington. Well, I'll certainly talk your ear off all day about the loveliness of trees. We do admit that trees grow tall, and if we're looking for a view shed, they could perhaps impede on the view of what we're hoping to see. I like this photo especially because if you look at the color of the river, it's actually pretty brown. It's actually almost up to that 10th Street bypass river trail area on the opposite side of the river. I'm thinking this photo was probably taken perhaps as opening day, maybe really early in the season, and we've had some spring snow melt, some heavier rain. So all that watershed that Alicia was talking about, all those individual headwater streams, the tributaries, the creeks, the channels, everything, all those watersheds are leading to this watershed. And so all that water is coming here and causing our river in Allegheny County now at this point to be quite brown. So if we had these buffers and plantings throughout the entire system, that would, you know, over time allow to a less impaired river when we have high water situations like this. We can certainly plant though in the same spots. This is just one bridge up from the stadium where we partnered with the Pirates. The different folks who were employed there with the Pirates facility came out. The Pirates parrot came out. I was there personally, and I can attest that he was a very good tree planter when he came to join us. And there are trees right there in front of the stadium on the Riverwalk. These larger London plane trees were here for a while, but through our Redbud project at the Western PA Conservancy, we partnered with the Sports and Exhibition Authority here at the stadiums, and we added all of this extra cover, these mulched areas, this landscaping, these other Redbud trees in the back. And this just aids in helping there to be just less grass, less water running directly onto that Riverwalk and into the stream. And it's also a way to incorporate tree cover even when you have an intricate situation. There are safety concerns for trees next to stadiums like this. People literally climb trees and try to illegally gain access to stadiums, concert halls, things like that. So by maintaining these larger trees well and pruning them regularly, keeping those branches away from the stadium, and then being mindful to what types or sizes of trees should be closer, we can fit with their needs while also having a buffer adjacent to that facility. Here's a view that maybe you may be less familiar with. This is another stadium in Pittsburgh. This is on the south side of the Monongahela, adjacent to Station Square. We're looking across to downtown and the Mon Wharf on the downtown side of the river. This is the Pittsburgh Riverhound Stadium. They are a professional soccer team in the USL network. My wife and I come here several times a year to enjoy some games, and just like PNC Park, Highmark Stadium is often voted as one of the most scenic soccer stadiums in all of the United States. Again, because we have that beautiful view of the river, that beautiful view of the city. What you can't see is on the river side of the stadium, there's actually a double railroad track, a CSX Corporation. So oftentimes there's freight trains zooming by just mere feet from the stadium. There's Gateway Clippers, there's the floating tiki bars out there. It's really quite a cool situation. But again, if we planted a whole row of trees, I would like that more, but that may not attract everyone to this type of view shed that you have at the stadium. We can still plant trees there, however. This is just the main entrance to the stadium, just on the other side of where the field is at. And here we had one of many volunteer events. I think there's almost 100 trees planted in just this section of Station Square alone over several years of the Pittsburgh Redbud Project. Many of them were with volunteer events just like this, and we're able to think of the buffer, if you will, as maybe different layers or different styles, where it's maybe not adjacent to the river exactly, but it's part of these landscape areas. They're all adding to the cumulative nature of having less stormwater flow going into the river next door. This is the same side of the river, just up on the other side of the stadium, heading towards Station Square. And you can kind of see how that infrastructure works. We have our biking and walking trail through the Three Rivers Heritage Trail Network. We have a landscaped buffer, then we have the railroad tracks, then there's the river and the natural buffer on the other side. I like this photo a lot because that natural buffer by the river is kind of up to however nature takes its course. Those trees may be there over time, they may not be. If you can pick out trees, you can see one of these is actually a tree of heaven. So it's a type of tree we don't particularly like to see in urban areas. So we're kind of planning for that maybe in the future, having the secondary buffer in an area we can more easily maintain. And hopefully that will continue to aid throughout the whole mindset of stormwater mitigation into the Three Rivers network. We'll jump back over to the North Shore. This is at the Carnegie Science Center. Point State Park is just up here on your right. And this is a larger network of both redbud projects and other complementary infrastructure projects. You can see there's many layers of trees from the river itself. There's multiple sections of hardscape. Then we have this larger rain garden area, and these rain gardens were actually installed by the Science Center to capture all of the water that comes off of the roofs of their building. And not only do they do that, but here's one sign here. There's many signs along the whole walk. It's actually part of their educational facility. You can actually take a tour. You can learn about what water is, where does water go, why do we do these projects, the power of both trees and perennials and plants to do the job that we're here talking about today. This is also at the Science Center, just slightly downriver. This is the USS Renault, the submarine that I believe just went into action right towards the end of World War II, and now it's docked here for part of the Science Center exhibits. And again, just multiple layers of this buffer network, having trees planted in this case right along the river, but then jumping across the trail and up onto this this landscaped area that had very few trees in it previously, and now we've added additional trees from there. Here's just a few of my favorite example species that we plant in some of these buffer areas, these landscaped areas. These would not necessarily be good choices for along a street or in a more salty or developed area, but just a few of the selections that we look at as we've done some of these plantings. On a broader scale, there is a county-wide municipal plan. It's called an Act 167 plan. And the goal of this being multi-municipal and including every municipality in the county is to simply preserve water quality. There are benchmarks for legal water quality standards, and then based off of that, there are benchmarks for compliance to reach those water quality standards. And part of that is a stormwater management plan. Part of that management plan does talk about riparian buffers. Of course, every municipality can go above and beyond if they would choose, but there are certain things that they need to do to be in compliance with this county-wide plan. Why I like to include this is that folks like us here at the Conservancy or other city nonprofits such as the 9 Mile Run Watershed Authority, now they're called Upstream, Friends of the Riverfront, Tree Pittsburgh, just to name a few, that Pittsburgh really is in a very unique situation. We have a very robust partnership of nonprofits that really do a good job of working together, supporting each other's work, and that really in turn benefits the community, benefits the residents, and can help municipalities achieve their goals for compliance standards, such as this Act 167 plan. An example is in the city of Carnegie. We worked with them to install green parking lots in 2 of their lots here in the downtown section of their city. The goal of this was to help them with compliance with Alcosan. Alcosan is the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority. They're the primary entity that manages the wastewater that we have throughout the county. By doing green infrastructure projects like this, that benefits folks like Alcosan to make their job better at water quality and managing all of that outflow water that comes during high water events. And then by partnering with us at the Conservancy or other organizations like us, this opens up the door for those municipalities to have different types of funding that's available. We were able to get them specific funding that was helpful to their goal of meeting Alcosan standards. They had very low interest loans for other parts of the work as well. We also engage with the community. All of these plants on the right here, they were not planted by contractors. They were not planted quickly. They were planted with volunteers that we engaged. We talked about education. We talked about the benefits of trees and why do we do a green infrastructure project like parking lot islands? Why do we pick the certain species that we do? How is this helping the long-term goals of the city reach their compliance standards with Alcosan, et cetera? So by engaging the community and having education, that leads to a more successful project over time. We've been back there several times to help them maintain that site as well. That's just a great example of how communities can work together to just reach our goals of having healthier water. Maybe you're watching this from a home like this one here on an urban street, and you think, okay, I have a tree outside my house, but buffers are great. I really can't do anything more. I have space for one tree. I'm right there with you. I have a tree right outside my window out here. It's one tree. It's the only tree on our entire small property here in Allegheny County. And it may not seem like much of a buffer, but I would say that community forestry as a whole can act like a buffer. That may only be one tree, but it's one tree of many. And so all of these green dots on the screen, these are all trees that we've planted through Conservancy projects since 2008. And it's slightly more than 37,000 trees. And that's mostly things like TreeVitalize or our Redbud project. It's throughout 57 different municipalities, all throughout neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh. And like I said, we really depend on volunteers to do a lot of our work with us. And there's over 14,000 volunteers just connected to only these 37,000 trees. So that really is a power in trees coming together and making a huge impact in the county. I'll go back one slide just to remind you about what this picture looks like here. And then move forward. This on the left here is that exact same site. This is what it looked like before the tree pit. Everything starts as a white dot on a curb. And through doing this many, many times, we've actually removed roughly 4 acres of impervious surface for these trees. Not every tree we plant needs a sidewalk pit. So not every one of those 37,000 trees resulted in a concrete cut like this, but the ones that did, when we sum that all together, you can see that we're actually making a pretty big impact. It's may not be as contiguous as a traditional buffer, but we are lessening how much concrete is out there in our urban environment. Here's a few examples of some of the street trees that we choose. Of course, I'll say the caveat that it just depends on site location, whether you have utility lines, whether you have site restrictions for intersections, how salty your street is. That'll all determine what kind of tree you choose. But these are some of the more common ones we have used throughout several of our planting projects so far. This is myself and my coworker Alicia Worley here at the Conservancy. We did a big inventory of all of the trees in the city of New Kensington this past year. I will say they're all public trees. They're all trees growing in the public right-of-way, like those sidewalk sites you saw on the previous slides, or they're growing in landscaped areas of their public parks. This does not include trees on private property in front yards, backyards, wood areas. But we have over 1,000 trees that we inventoried in that couple-week time span, using a program called iTree, which can quantify the benefits of urban trees. These 1,080 trees on an annual basis intercept about 4,600 cubic feet of stormwater. So again, power in trees. My red maple outside my house may do only a little bit when you look at just that one tree, but when you combine it with the other trees in my neighborhood, it kind of does the same effect here as these trees in New Kensington. For green infrastructure, anyone can do it. On the left here is a picture of the borough of Sharpsburg. That's just up the Allegheny River from Pittsburgh. We had just an unused lawn area between these basketball courts, and there's a baseball field on the left. Came in, put some infrastructure in, planted lots of plants and greenery, and now it acts as a functioning rain garden. And on the right here, this is my own backyard. This is my back deck. This is the fence between me and my neighbor's house on the left. And we've got our catch basin in so far, so kind of similar like this. You can kind of interpolate what my goals are for my backyard based off of the picture there on the left. But what you can't see behind me are the cellar doors that go into my basement. And in several high water events and heavy rain events, we have water that comes here from the left and comes to the catch basin, but doesn't all go there. It actually goes down into my basement, and we have a sump pump from there. But over time, changing this grass into a smaller version of the rain garden on the left would certainly help in keeping that water out of my basement. And this is the same rain garden on the left in Sharpsburg, just looking in the opposite direction. You can see 1 year later, actually it's less than a year later, it's just later on that season in the summer. You can see how all the flowers have popped, the trees are there, where I was back watering the trees. That's why those gator bags are on the bottom of the trees. And I will say one of my new favorite plants is ornamental onion, this allium on the right. I actually bought several for my own home after seeing how cool they looked in Sharpsburg. But yeah, it's just a great way to use infrastructure. You can think about it anywhere and really help out how much water is making it eventually down to the rivers. So with that, I will just conclude by just saying I'd love to have you volunteer with us. If you're watching us from the Pittsburgh area or you coming to visit, we'd love to have you join. Both Alicia and I are having tree planting seasons that are coming up. I think Alicia's might have started already, or if not, it's starting very soon. Ours here in Pittsburgh will start in mid-October. You're welcome to check out our website, waterlandlife.org, to see an updated schedule of when those events may be. My coworker Alicia is mainly the main contact for getting volunteers out to those events. So I'm sure if you volunteer, you'll be connected with her at some point in the process, although you're certainly welcome to reach out to Alicia or I directly. Here's our contact information here at the bottom of the screen. And certainly if you're a member, we appreciate that too. You know, we can't do good work here without your membership, without volunteerism as well. So certainly thank you all for the time you put in already and what you've been willing to contribute. And if you're interested, I would encourage you to take a look at our website and find out ways to volunteer or donate if that would be something you're interested in. And with that, I will turn it over back to you, Carmen. I know you've been watching Q&A, and yeah, just thanks for joining and wanting to be more interested and talk about trees. I will also stop sharing my screen now too, if that would be helpful, Carmen.
Actually, no, you can actually keep it up. That sounds
Sure.
Looks good.
You got it.
Thank you. And thank you, Alicia and Brian. Seriously, such great information, great content, really great examples of the importance of trees and buffers. And I'm sure everyone here will agree that's just great information. Additionally, we have some great questions that people have been submitting. So let me get to a few of those. I'm pulling those up on my screen. So if you still have questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A. We have a good 15 minutes or so to kind of go through a few. So let's start with a question. Give me one moment here, from Thomas. And maybe this is for you, Alicia. What's the difference between a stream and a run?
Size, mainly runs are typically smaller. It's also a regionality thing of what somebody might call something, but a run is just smaller stream. Although, like I said, I live in the Cherry Run watershed, and this stream is anywhere from 15 to 30 feet wide at some places, and it's still called a run. So, but that's just nomenclature.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. Have a question from someone who's asking related to invasive plants. Have you seen many invasive herbaceous plants invading areas that have been planted? What strategies do you use to control those or these and to avoid them altogether? And do you seed these areas with natives? So I'll put that for Alicia and for Brian.
All right, I'm off mute, so I'll go first. And invasives are there. They're always something we think about, we're aware of, and we're never going to totally win against them, but we can mitigate some of their issues. When we do plant buffers, sometimes the invasive comes in because mowing has stopped. So what we'd like to do is have a first few years of the establishment period of a buffer where some mowing may still continue to help control the invasive. Depending on the landowner, there may be some herbiciding that might happen. If you're really lucky, you can rent a herd of goats to control your invasives. But and then even seeding, when you take a open area and you seed with Riparian seed mix, which is something you can order. You want to make sure that where you're ordering your Riparian mix has native, and it also says that it is making sure it is without weeds. So those are a couple things you have to do as a landowner to make sure they're not coming in. But yeah, weeds are part of the maintenance. We're not stopping them, but we can take care of them. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I agree with that, Alicia. Certainly in the urban area, there's invasives everywhere on the riverbanks. most places you stop and look at least that natural area of the river, you're probably looking at more non-native stuff than native, especially the more urban you get. But certainly in the places that we plant, we do have maintenance built into the initial grants. There is time and funding dedicated for that. We often partnership with the Student Conservation Association. There's also a Pittsburgh specific organization called Pulse that a lot of nonprofits around here can have a summer field season fellow or even a longer year-long fellow, and using that as not just to go out and manage invasives on their own, but also to organize volunteer events, work with these partners. You know, for example, our Redbud project along the river, while we were able to contribute a lot of planting for that, when it comes to management of the river trails area, a different nonprofit called Friends of the Riverfront tends to be more, that's more of their realm as far as maintaining that site. So we partner with them. We've actually had joint volunteer events where we're both out there together and organizing volunteers to cut back vegetation at different times of the year. Contracted work as well is built into those grants from time to time too. I love the goats. The goats have been a great source for stuff throughout town. We even actually had them here in Oakmont, where I live. Oakmont hired them, and whenever it was their last day, the marching band came out from the high school. They gave them a parade as the goats left town. They had goat-shaped cookies from the bakery, and it was really cool to have them out there, because you ask yourself, okay, why was the marching band playing for goats? And then through that, you learn about invasive species, why they're bad, how native plants benefit the river, and things like that. So yes, there is maintenance built in, and you kind of have to tackle it from a lot of different avenues to try to get a really good success for that.
Thanks, Alicia and Brian. Great answer to that. We have several questions related to the different types of species that people can plant. One in particular, can you provide suggestions for trees or shrubs that can be planted in riparian areas under power lines? Brian, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. Yeah, we absolutely still plant trees under power lines in the city. We just plant what are called utility compatible species, things that we know won't reach the height that Duquesne light will need to then top them later in order to clear for the lines. There are certainly in an urban area a smaller palette of trees that will work. Oftentimes these smaller trees are more ornamental, they're more flowering, and they can be more stressed by things like salt, things like higher amounts of pollution. So there is I imagine a smaller list of trees and shrubs that would work here in Pittsburgh versus at a more of a farming area in a more rural area. Certainly some of the ones we've used along the rivers we have used witch hazel, we have used serviceberry, sweet bay magnolia. Those tend to be more so in places that are more landscaped and less of a hardscape situation. As you get in more of a streetscape situation, there are cultivars of flowering crab apples, flowering cherries. Redbuds are pretty good, especially on a calmer street versus maybe a higher street like Penn Avenue or Liberty Avenue. But certainly just doing your homework on salt tolerance is probably the biggest thing I can suggest for urban areas, just making sure you choose things that will tolerate not only salt in soil, but salt spray from vehicles driving by if you're close to a roadway.
And when you start looking at right-of-ways, utility right-of-ways, specifically the power lines in urban areas, we're maybe planting long stretches of stream. So my practice, I do a one call, and we're all doing one calls when we do all of this, and you need to work with your own utility company too to find out what they might be less willing to have or handle. But again, it's the shrub species. I usually plant them on the edge of the right of way for in the rural ones, not directly underneath, because sometimes landowners don't know when their utility companies are going to come in and do a maintenance. And it's really disheartening when you plant some things and then they get cleared out because the utility company didn't want it there, wasn't communicated with it. You're doing a different kind of maintenance, and you did choose some of those low trees like the witch hazel. I agree with that. Elderberries are really good. So not only can you have things that grow underneath them, you may be able to use them to make jelly, or some people like to use elderberries for wine. So there you can pick a shrub species that stays low enough, and you can work with the utility company as well. And the other thing you can do in those areas is to plant some of the lower pollinator mixes that handle riparian areas as well.
Great, thanks to you both on that. Just for everyone here, so that you know, the trees that Alicia and Brian have mentioned, we have those on our website. And in a few days, we'll send out an email that has the recording to this webinar. And we'll also share a list of those different species so that you'll have access to them to refer to. So, so some of these plants, you don't have to quickly write them down. We'll have them for you and we'll send that to you in that follow-up email. Okay, so another question that we have is related to maintenance and care for trees. Who cares for the newly planted trees, and how much care do they need over the first season? So to either one of you.
I'll start, Brian. So our tree, I heard Brian mention earlier too, that we build in some maintenance time when we're planting trees. As we're working from funding sources, that has a time limit way shorter than maybe some maintenance that might happen to a buffer. But the other thing that we do is, if we are offering maintenance, but we're also teaching the landowners how they can take care of the buffers as well, whether it's a single tree, to come in and maybe do some mowing if it needs to happen, or straighten a tree tube. It's something where we want people to enjoy their riparian areas. We want them to walk through it. So they might notice if a shelter gets knocked over. And really, it doesn't take that much maintenance per tree when after it's planted. A few minutes here, a few minutes there can get your buffer to stay in great shape. And there's also volunteers. We're working with areas to see if there's groups of people that want to help take care of riparian buffers. Sometimes a landowner may be willing to put in several acres of buffer, but no, they don't have time. So if we can help people partner with a neighbor or something and take care of it, we do that as well. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, we have a kind of a similar approach, I guess. Yeah, I like what you said about how oftentimes the maintenance that's needed kind of goes beyond the scope of the initial grants that have made the planting possible. And then that's very true here as well, that for our Redbud project, we had it that the first 2 years of the tree's life in that site would be fully maintained by us at the Conservancy. So that was our staff coming out and making sure we watered the trees in the summer, we mulched, did weeding, things like that. And then you're looking at some of the sites I had in the slides, like Station Square or the Carnegie Science Center or PNC Park. Then after that 2 year window passed, then we had agreements that that would then pass to whoever the owner was of that site to then maintain from there. But we certainly aren't going anywhere. I still go back and prune some of the trees I've been pruning for years in front of PNC Park for trail clearance, or we just had a mulching event over at Station Square, and we were mulching trees that we had just planted last year, and also trees we planted, I think, up to 4 years ago. So we certainly still keep those relationships going as needed, of course, through that. Our street trees, we mainly rely on what every municipality is receiving those trees to maintain from there. So if that's the city of Pittsburgh, it's often a resident that is agreeing to water those trees for the first 2 years, but then any type of tree maintenance like pruning is handled by Pittsburgh City Forestry, although Tree Pittsburgh is a great partner for, they handle a lot of tree maintenance from there. I know Jake Malofsky at Tree Pittsburgh has had some great crews that come out and help prune the trees of like young tree training while they can still be easily handled with smaller tools. As you get out into the county, those municipalities often have a shade tree commission. They have maybe an organizational group, community group of some kind that they may assist residences with maintaining those adjacent street trees that were requested. So certainly tree care is something that we're always asking in our process before we bring the trees to the table at each of these municipalities.
Thanks, Brian. Here's a question for you, Alicia. Is there an optimal number of stems per acre for a rural stream to have an effective buffer? And perhaps depends on the variety or other factors. Is there a magic number? Just trying to figure out per acre how many trees to plant for an effective buffer.
There can be a safe number is about 200 stems per acre. So it's a mix of the trees and the shrubs. If you make something more dense, it would cost more with tree protection. So perhaps if you were to double the number, you wouldn't use as much protection. You would expect some mortality, but then you wouldn't have to spend as much protecting the trees. You can make that number lower if you have larger trees, or you spend more time with deer protection. So even, if you went through and planted 150 stems per acre, but you tried to ensure all of those survived, that original density number is lower. So again, it's time, care, and mortality. You want a canopy closure in about 7 to 10 years. So that's what you're looking for.
Thanks for that. We have time for maybe a couple more. Question related to deer. Are deer a problem in our riparian buffers?
Yeah, even in the city, we get deer out here for sure. I see a lot of deer throughout Pittsburgh. I have them outside my house all the time. They love eating the acorns of the swamp white oak just up the street from me. Yeah, I mean, we put deer protection on all of our trees. We have the bark guards that we put on the trunk to help protect against bucks rubbing their antlers on in the fall. They also serve other purposes too, like keeping weed whackers away, even keeping beavers away. Some of you may have remembered a few years ago when a beaver right outside the Carnegie Science Center, just up from that submarine, it took 16 of our trees in one night, just like that. So they also help with other wildlife too. But I know there's also deer out in Indiana County for sure as well, Alicia.
Yeah, the deer. So when we're planting with these tree shelters, there's different heights of tree shelters. So if there's a super dense deer issue, you may choose a taller shelter. I typically use a 4-foot one, or even in a buffer that I go back and do maintenance on. If I see the deer travel a regular pattern, and you see sometimes the trees just can't get past a certain tree tube because the deer are munching them off. If I take another tree tube and cut it in half and extend it, those few areas, those trees go as well. But again, the beavers, even bears can be an issue because wasps like to get inside these tree shelters. So it's kind of a balance of how you protect your buffer versus what's going to mug your buffer. And we just have to work with nature to help protect it.
And are there certain, thank you guys, are there any plants or trees that are more water thirsty than others?
Sure. Sycamores are certainly love to have their feet wet. The swamp white oaks, the elderberries can handle it if you're trying to do lower things. And then there's stuff that can tolerate it sometimes as well. But all trees can help and do what they need to do to filter water and make our water sources better.
We have a landowner here who's asking that they have a small stream on their property, and how do they move forward to partner with programs to improve their buffer area?
Well, they could reach out to me, or they could reach out to Brian, and we can figure out where they're located specifically. And then the next thing that would happen, we'd have a little conversation on the phone. I'd look at the map aerially from the computer, and then we'd schedule a site visit to have a conversation to see how much room there is and what funding sources are available to plant a buffer. It could take season for me is you're planting in spring and fall mainly. If it's in the right place, there's funding available. It could be planted this spring. If there's not funding, it may take till next spring just to get the funding there. But that's what we like to do. We need the places we can plant the buffers.
Thank you. And this is our final question. And it's a question related to where do we get our riparian seed mixes?
Oh, there's, if you want this, and then this is in no particular order, I will use the local nurseries. Sometimes I go to Musters or Pikes Peak or in Indiana County. Ernst Seed is a great place to order native seed mixes as well. And those are a couple places I like to use. But I look for local distributors as well. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I use many of the same places you just mentioned. Any of time we needed trees for a more buffer-like project here, I've bought from Muzzers or Pikes Peak. I've bought seed mixes from Ernst. There's another company I've bought seeds from, but I forget the name, but I've bought some seeds from them too that have been really nice. If I remember that company, I'll send it to you, Carmen. You can send it maybe out to other resources too. But yeah, there's a lot of great resources here, even just in Allegheny County. If you're tuning in from the Pittsburgh area, lots of great nurseries that we partnered with. The more local you can go, of course, the better, since you are getting seeds, ideally, hopefully from more of your area of the country. And yeah, I just encourage you to look at local sites. And certainly if there's other questions about specific nurseries around here, I can also, if you want to email me or something, I can also get those over to you as well.
Well, thank you. Thanks again, Brian and Alicia, great information. And thanks to you all for attending our webinar today. And again, as I mentioned, we'll have it recorded. We'll have it on our website. Sorry we weren't able to get to everybody's question, but if you still want an answer, feel free to email us at info@paconserve.org, and we will certainly respond back. Or you also saw Alicia and Brian's email too. But again, info@paconserve.org. And of course, go to our website, waterlandlife.org, for more information. Again, we'll send out some more information with some of these links that we talked about. And you'll get that in the next few days. Just want to wish you a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon at the next Conservancy event, whether online or outdoors in person. Take care, everyone, and thanks again.